Everybody, thank you so much for joining this live. And this live is to put a squash to all the rumors, all the talk that's going on, all this talk about new popes, new Mahdi's, Antichrist. Guys, I'm the for real Mahdi. No cap, no cap. For Rizzle, for Rizzle, for Rizzle? I don't know. Anyways, that's my old guy stuff talk there. We used to do the Perizzle for shizzles. Anyway, no, we're going to be talking about the resurrection, and this is for non-Christians. This is a stream where you guys can come up and express your doubts. And so, change my mind. Jesus rose from the dead. We just had Easter not all that long ago. The resurrection is really the central event of the Christian faith. It is the foundation that Christianity is based on. And so, if the resurrection didn't happen, then obviously Christianity would be false. But if the resurrection did happen, then Christianity would be true. And so, yeah, changed my mind. If nobody's ready to come up instantly, that's cool. I got some slides. We can just do a little quick presentation. But there is a link. You should see a pinned link at the top. So if you want to join, tell me why Jesus is dead, or tell me why Jesus wasn't actually resurrected. Maybe you're a Muslim and you think that he was ascended into heaven or something else like that, but he was never crucified. Bring your arguments. And so, I see Ismail. He's in the chat, and so allowed to deceive the world. Ismail's going to be joining. This is going to be great, guys. Coming Saturday afternoon. I don't know if you guys have seen. I'm not really on TikTok, but I saw Sips with Sarah a couple weeks ago, and Ismail basically has been deepfaked by Central Dawa. So we're going to be talking about that. And so apparently Central Dawa can't get anybody real to debate him anymore because the guy is just a joke, or just he's scared to debate people. He can only debate I don't know, deep fakes, AI, and not real people. And so, but Ismail will be joining me to talk about that and just talk about his journey from Islam over to Christianity. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen him with Matt Fradd on Pints with Aquinas. Awesome testimony. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that. And so anyway, yeah, so glad to see you in the comments, bro. And that is going to be a fun stream. It's pretty pathetic. I mean, how bad does your dawa have to be when you can't even debate real people? You're just debating AI and saying that it's somebody else. And so, all right. So I guess we don't have anybody ready to come up yet. That's totally fine. I'm not doing these lives all the time. This hopefully will be a regular part of the channel going forward. And so maybe people just don't expect kind of the routine yet. That's totally fine. And so we'll open up with some slides, join in anytime. But how can we know that Jesus rose from the dead? And so what is the proof? What is the evidence? And so let me see here. Jesus being crucified, that's not really hard to fathom, right? People were crucified all that time during that period. Josephus talks about all kinds of people being crucified, even people that he knew. Rome did that to a lot of people. There's nothing particularly special or even supernatural to claim that Jesus was crucified. But Jesus's followers claimed something really wild after that he literally physically rose from the dead. And so if this is true, this is one of the greatest events that ever happened in history. But if it's false, then Christianity just isn't really worth paying attention to. And so there are three possible options here. Either Jesus's followers were liars, Jesus's followers were mistaken, or Jesus really rose from the dead. And so this is a trilemma. I'm sure you guys have heard of the liar, lunatic, Lord that C.S. Lewis brings out. This is a little bit of a variation. I'm deriving some of this from William Paley, who, you might see me kind of throw his picture up on some of my videos. William Paley, just for those of you who don't know, wrote a really awesome book called A View of the Evidences of Christianity that I think really every Christian should read. And there's no excuse not to read it, because it's actually public domain, so anybody can download it. If you have access to Google Books or archive.org or anything else like that, you can read it. And it is something that, even though it's old, the arguments in this book, for the most part, just really hold up. But Paley advances this particular trilemma. So there you have it. So was it a lie? When you hear a claim like Jesus rose from the dead, it's actually fair to ask, were they lying? Was it all a hoax? After all, we are talking about a miracle, and people do lie about miracles all the time, right? And Christians haven't run from that question. They've really answered it for centuries. And so there's, uh, nothing wrong with exploring this particular option, even though it's not really like a popular option that critics raise. But I think by the end of this presentation, you'll see why. I wouldn't be shocked if it's something that is like that comes back into fashion at some point, because the evidence that I'm going to present for the multi-sensory appearances is really hard to refute. And so let's see. So was it a lie? The reason why that's hard to believe, obviously, is that these resurrection claims were made publicly to hostile audiences as the foundation of a brand new movement. Not really a good way to pull off a scam. That's a good way to get yourself killed. They are preaching this particular message shortly after Jesus was crucified in Jerusalem, of all places. And so, like, I think the people who wanted Jesus put to death were still around. They were still upset about this particular person claiming to be the Messiah. And now these people are going around basically blaming them for Jesus's death and saying that he's alive and that he's actually the Messiah and the Son of God after all. And so, yeah, that's not a real popular claim in that particular area. If you're going to start a cult, do it like the Mahdi, go do it somewhere safe and just claim some crazy stuff like you killed the Pope somehow by your followers shouting a bunch of stuff, even though he's an 88-year-old man. And you're going to make these claims in England where no one's going to persecute you. If anything, they're going to protect you for, even though you have crazy religious beliefs, you have some sort of freedom of speech, right? But yeah, those guys would not try to pull that same stunt and say Saudi, okay? Because why? Well, we all know why. And so this a similar kind of situation here. These are not claims that you would want to make in Jerusalem at that time. And so the first Christians knew the risk, and some of them did pay for it with their lives. And so we have James, who was killed in Acts chapter 12. We have early accounts of Peter from church fathers being killed. It's mentioned also in John. There's this, Jesus has this talk with Peter that he's going to die in a way that glorifies God. And most people think that this was written after the event. And so, yeah, and then of course, all throughout the book of Acts, there's this theme of danger. If you read Paul's letters, there's this theme of constant danger and persecution. And so the first Christians knew the risks. They weren't distant fans. They were eyewitnesses or insiders. They would be in a position to know if the resurrection claim was true or false. And so people will come back and say, well, people die for lies all the time, but they usually don't die for things that they claim to have seen themselves. They might die for something that they heard and that they sincerely believe, but this is a different claim. This is something that they personally said that they experienced, right? So if it was false, they had every reason to stay quiet and keep practicing their faith the old way, but they didn't. They stuck their necks out for something that they said that they saw. So religious fraud is easy if your audience already wants to believe you, but that's not what happened here. The resurrection was preached to skeptics, not insiders, like I already said, in a hostile environment at the real risk of persecution, not just social awkwardness. They weren't just going to get made fun of. And so lying about a miracle is a lot safer when the worst that can happen is people will roll their eyes. And so you do see that from time to time. Like I remember Bart Ehrman debating Justin Bass, and he brought up the followers of Baal Shem Tov. Well, Baal Shem Tov was a Jewish rabbi, but that reportedly worked miracles. I want to say this was like in the 1600s or something like that. But he wasn't in like this place where like people were heavily persecuting him, examining his claims. People just kind of thought, this is just kind of a religious kook, and they ignored him, right? And so there wasn't any like major scrutiny to the claims that were being made. And so let's see. So what if they were deceived? Maybe they weren't lying. Maybe they were just mistaken, right? That's a very common take. If you guys saw the interview with Alex O'Connor and Rhett McLaughlin recently on Alex's podcast. That's a really common take. That's what Rhett thought it was. He didn't give a counter explanation of what happened, but he just claimed that they were deceived and that was it. He didn't really explain what he thought actually happened, but he thinks that that's the most likely option. And it's a popular take. Maybe it was just religious hype, wishful thinking, misread visions, and things like that. Some kind of experience that people really wanted it to be true, and they worked themselves up, but they didn't really see anything, right? But that only works if you keep it vague, if there's not a lot of details. So to assess that theory, we need to get specific. What exactly did they claim that happened? Because the content of their claims makes simple confusion very unlikely. So before, we're talking about the context of their claims, right? The context was persecution. Now we're talking about the content of their claims. What did they say that they actually saw? They claimed that they had lengthy conversations with Jesus after his death, that they met him in the flesh multiple times. They said that they touched him, that he wasn't just a vision. Jesus even invited them to touch his wounds. They ate with him. They ate fish with him, right? He convinced Thomas, a skeptic, a doubter, by inviting him to touch his wounds. There were independent witnesses. We're not talking about like one big echo chamber. We're talking about Thomas, James, which is Jesus's brother, who also we know was pretty skeptical. We have Peter, who didn't believe that when he heard that the tomb was empty initially, but later came and checked it out. We have female followers. We have a whole host of different folks here, right? And they said that Jesus stayed with them for 40 days after rising. Okay, well, again, that's very difficult to mistake, seeing your dead rabbi for not just 1 day or 2 days, but 40 days in groups with all kinds of different people and all kinds of different situations. And we actually read in the book of Acts that they differentiated these physical meetings from later spiritual experiences. You even have Paul saying that, like, Jesus appeared to me, but it was like in a different fashion. And we see that it's like the way that it's described even in the book of Acts, it's different, right? And so if we're just looking at this and using some common sense here, there are only three possible options. Jesus' followers were liars. We've already ruled that out. Jesus' followers were mistaken. We've ruled that out. The content and the context rules out honest mistakes or lying. So therefore, Jesus really rose from the dead. Now, you might be saying, okay, well, Eric, this is just for the Bible tells me so kind of stuff. And so to avoid that conclusion, this is what the skeptics will most likely come back with. The disciples never actually really claimed those things that are in the Gospels. They didn't claim all of those physical details. All of that was just added later, much later, as legendary in development. But in that case, they weren't lying or mistaken. They were just seriously misrepresented, right? And so now we're going to the gospel accounts themselves. Are the physical details real, or are these just things that were made up much later, invented to give like some sort of apologetic value and different things like that to try and bolster the case that Jesus really rose from the dead, but none of them really experienced these things? That's the most common claim that you're going to get from critical scholars, critics, skeptics, and all of that kind of stuff. So what we need to do then to assess the resurrection is we need to think about, who are the gospel writers? What kind of writers are they? Are they reliable? Are they close up to the facts? Are they truthful? And this is what I'm going to argue just briefly. I'm just going to give like a little sampler. But what stands out from my assessment at looking at the Gospels is that they were actually careful and honest writers, that they were knowledgeable, and that they were either eyewitnesses or close to eyewitnesses. And that is what the claim is in early church history, that these Gospels were written by apostles, Matthew and John, or companions apostles, Luke, who was a companion of Paul, who would have had opportunity to meet the disciples in Jerusalem, as well as Mark, who was basically like Peter's scribe and traveling companion as well. And so my claim is not for the Bible tells me so. I'm not begging the question for the Gospels and just saying, well, they're inspired and they record all these details. Haha, game over. Jesus rose from the dead. That would be pretty stupid. But what I am saying is that the gospel accounts reflect what the original eyewitnesses said. And that's not a miracle by itself. People can make bold claims. But if they made these claims in that context, it's strong evidence for a miracle. I'm not asking you to take it on faith, we're going to evaluate the gospel writers by looking at some of the clues just within their own texts. Their style, detail, and accuracy tells us what kind of authors that they are. So what kind of evidence do we have that the gospels are honest and unembellished? We have external evidence, real historical anchors. And so let's take a look at one example. This is a favorite of mine. This is in John chapter 2, verse 20. Jesus has just cleansed the temple, and the religious leaders are hot. They're upset. Like, what authority do you have to do these things? It's taken us 46 years to build this temple, right? Because he says, hey, if you guys destroy this temple, like they're asking, like, give us a sign. What is the sign that you have in order to cleanse this temple? And he's like, if you destroy this temple, in 3 days, I'll raise it up. And they're thinking completely naturally. They fire back 46 years. It's taken us 46 years to build this temple. Well, what's interesting, we actually know from history, is that Herod started rebuilding the temple at around 18 to 17 BC. This is according to the Jewish historian Josephus. That puts this moment in Jesus' life around AD 27 to 28. Now, we also have a further confirmation in another gospel in Luke chapter 3, verse 1, because we know that this particular event took place at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. And Luke 3 talks about in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar, that's when Jesus began his ministry, right? And so Tiberius began co-ruling with Augustus in AD 12. This is according to the Roman historian Suetonius. He talks about Tiberius. And depending on how you count, this actually places John the Baptist's ministry at around 26 to 27 AD, because, again, remember, this is at the close of John the Baptist's ministry, and then Jesus comes on the scene. And so what we have here is from 4 different sources, a real historical anchor point that we have the 46 years, well, Josephus backs that up. Luke, in an undesigned way, just kind of fills in that this is when Jesus's ministry began, and it also began at the beginning of Tiberius reigning. And so when we put this all together, we have this clear picture of like when Jesus's ministry actually started. And this isn't something that's like, they're obviously not copying Josephus. They're obviously not researching Suetonius and just like really trying to get this right. This shows that they're knowledgeable and close up to the facts, and they know the details, and it's best explained by them actually being there. But there's actually more here. There's an undesigned coincidence, which Jesus, this is on the cross and then also at his trial. There's this weird accusation about him. They say that he says, I will destroy this temple and in 3 days build another, right? So they're basically accusing Jesus of terrorism. And, while he's on trial before the Sanhedrin. And then later in Mark 15:29, when he's on the cross, you have this angry crowd yelling at him and saying, and mocking him, saying, you who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. And so at his trial and crucifixion, Jesus is mocked and accused of threatening the temple. But here's the really weird part, is that in the Synoptic Gospels, there's absolutely zero record of Jesus ever saying that. It's only in John's Gospel, right? The verse that we just talked about, John 2:19, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up. But John, he actually drops this. There's nothing about this particular statement that gets Jesus in hot water during his trial. It's not repeated in John's particular gospel. John just gives us the original statement casually. He just drops it as something that Jesus said, and he never goes back and explains it later in his gospel. But the synoptics give the accusation in mockery, but neither account explains the other. But they fit together in a way that's like undesigned, that actually makes sense, that looks like actual truthful testimony, and not just people just making things up. I don't think John is just deliberately like, let me put this in here because that will be really cool and I'll fill in that gap, but then I'll completely drop it. Like, no, that doesn't make sense. But this does make sense if the original line gets misunderstood, twisted, and thrown back at Jesus under pressure, like a garbled kind of saying. And so hopefully you guys can see that, if that makes sense. And so if it does, feel free to put your ones in the chat if you're following. If you have questions, if you do a super chat, I'll be able to see it, recognize it. I can look for questions if it's not a super chat, but it might be a little more difficult for me. Here's another example of the gospel writers being really, really knowledgeable. Okay. And so Archelaus, he's only mentioned once in the gospels. And it's in Matthew 2:22, when Joseph, this is Jesus's adopted father, or whatever you want to call it, the husband of Mary, heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father, he was afraid to go there. So if you guys remember, Herod, which skeptics like to say like this never ever happened, but Herod basically ordered all the children in Bethlehem to be slaughtered, and Joseph was warned and he fled to Egypt. And now he's coming back, right? He's on his way back with Mary and the baby Jesus. Herod is now dead, right? He gets the news. Herod is now dead. And so he's like, okay, I'll come back. But Matthew 2:22, he hears of Archelaus ruling in his father's place. And there's no explanation at all of why that would have made Joseph afraid. But again, the Jewish historian Josephus fills in the picture. Herod the Great died shortly before Passover in 4 BC. Archelaus took temporary power pending confirmation by Rome. Again, this is all in Josephus. Hundreds of thousands of pilgrims would come to Jerusalem for Passover. I think Josephus says it's like a million. Even if he's exaggerating, it's like 100,000. That's still a whole lot of people. And so all these people were descending for this particular feast. And there's a lot more here. So what happened is a group of Jews were protesting in the temple, demanding justice for Herod's past crimes. There was something that happened the year before that they were very upset about, and they were protesting it. And they ended up there was kind of like a fight that broke out, and some Jewish people picked up rocks and threw them at some Roman soldiers, and actually one of them got killed. And so Archelaus got wind of this, and he pulled there's a new sheriff routine and sent armed horsemen to trap the crowd inside the temple. He surrounded the temple and there was orders like nobody comes out and nobody else goes in. And he ordered the troops to go in and slaughtered 3,000 worshipers. Again, this is according to Josephus. And after that, Archelaus said, "Go home. Passover is canceled." And the crowd scattered, of course, in terror, right? Like this is like a pretty crazy event, like you canceling Passover. So as Mary and Joseph returned from Egypt, they would have obviously passed some Jewish pilgrims, because there was plenty of Jewish people that lived in Egypt. They would have passed them carrying word of this massacre. Having already fled one homicidal king, Joseph chose not to enter the domain of another. And so I hope you guys are seeing this, how this makes sense, how this fits together in this like really subtle, undesigned kind of way. But it fits, right? And it shows that Matthew isn't just making up a story, as some critics like to say. No, this actually fits perfectly with what we know of Herod's character. But then also we see this dovetailing right here that is just like a really strong mark of historicity. Just one more example here. And how did Matthew know what Herod said to his servants? All right. So if you read in Matthew 14:1-2, there's this really strange kind of thing going on here. John the Baptist has been killed, and then Matthew kind of gives the backstory. And he's asking his servants about Jesus. And it says, Herod said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He's been raised from the dead," right? So he's asking about it. He speculates his own kind of thoughts, his own ideas of who this person is. But here's an awkward question that would get raised, right? Is Matthew some sort of like omniscient narrator? How does Matthew know what Herod said privately to his own staff? That's kind of weird, right? And so, but if we go and we look a little bit further in Luke's gospel, in a completely unrelated passage that has absolutely nothing to do with John the Baptist, his death, Herod, or anything else like that, other than this one stray phrase, Luke 8:3 tells us that Jesus had a bunch of female followers who helped support his ministry financially. And one of them was named Joanna, the wife of Huzzah, Herod's household manager. Okay. And so some of Jesus's followers actually had family inside Herod's inner circle. This kind of detail isn't just possible. It's exactly what we would expect with somebody who has real historical access. So hopefully you guys see that. I hope that makes sense. This is what eyewitness testimony would look like, right? And so this is showing you guys that these are what these authors are like. that they're knowledgeable, that they're close up to the facts, and they're trying to get it right. Okay. So now there are dozens and dozens of examples, and anybody can come up again anytime. Even if you're like, if no non-believers are wanting to come up and challenge the resurrection, if you are a doubting Christian and you want to like ask questions, that's totally fine. Yeah, where's my hoodie? If I'm the real Mahdi, I got to get the hoodie out. But we can answer some of that. There are, but anyways, what I was going back to what I was saying there, distracted myself looking at the chat too. But here's the thing, right? There are dozens and dozens of examples. Like I'm just giving you like 3 or 4 examples, right? If it was just these 3 or 4, like you wouldn't really have a case. But if you look at all of the examples put together, and I have a whole video, a series of videos, how history confirms the Bible, and I have a whole series of videos called Undesigned Coincidences that goes through dozens of these examples. And even that is just touching the tip of the iceberg. There are probably over 100 of these kind of different confirmations, not just between the Gospels and like secular history of the Gospels, kind of confirming the Gospels in the way that we just saw with Matthew and Luke, but also Acts and Paul's letters, Acts and other things that we know about secular history, archaeology, and all of these different things that I've talked about in other streams and different things like that. And I'm sure I can talk about them more in future streams, but there's a lot of this kind of evidence, right? And so if the gospel writers didn't make things up, and if they were careful about what they included and were either eyewitnesses or close to them and preserved what was actually claimed about Jesus rising from the dead, then what we're looking at is truthful historical testimony. What I'm talking about here is a unified view of the gospel, one that makes the most sense of the evidence. And so what I'm trying to say is that it would make more sense for the gospel writers to just be people, the kind of character who aren't just like making things up, but then telling you truth after truth after truth after truth and getting fact after fact after fact right, but then feeling free to just like make things up and invent them, right? That's kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of gospel author, a schizophrenic author. What I'm saying is that a more unified picture is this is just the way that they were. This is their character. And so who is Jesus? What happened after he died? Did he really rise again? I'm not asking unbelievers to take it on blind faith. I'm asking them to follow the evidence because the resurrection is the best explanation of the facts. And so that's it. That's super short. I kept it short on purpose because, like I said, I'm hoping to have people that will challenge me, push me on this, because I know y'all are out there because you're in my comments. And so hopefully y'all can come up. I will say, just kind of while I'm continuing, this is different. This is a different kind of case for the resurrection than, say, like the minimal facts approach. I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with like Mike Licona and Gary Habermas, especially if you've been following apologetics for any length of time. They basically argue that mostly through like 1 Corinthians 15 and the creed that's early, that's found in Paul's writings. And like this early belief that, Jesus really appeared to Peter and the 12 and the apostle Paul. And the only problem that I have with that, I mean, that's fine. That's all true. And that's good, is that 1 Corinthians 15 and really the apostle Paul doesn't really give you the details, the physical details of the resurrection in order to rule out honest mistakes, right? So the best thing that I think that they could say is, well, it looks like they had a group experience. And we know that group hallucinations aren't something that actually happen. And so therefore, the best explanation is Jesus rose from the dead. That seems to kind of be like, and I'm not trying to straw man them or anything like that. I'm just oversimplifying. And so, be patient with me. I know it's more nuanced than that. But I don't think that still rules out honest mistakes. Okay. Because how do we know that they were rational in order to believe it, unless there was some kind of multi-sensory experiences? Because people have, I don't know, people claim to see apparitions. You have like the angel Moroni supposedly appearing to 3 different witnesses, and they signed affidavits, and they, even though they left the Mormon church, were still like, they went back and kind of explained that it was more of a spiritual experience than like a physical one later in some of their confessions and writings, not confessions, but you know what I mean? Like they're them just kind of talking candidly and different things like that. And so without the details of testimony, like a miracle claim is just vague, right? And so that's why this stands in kind of contrast to the minimal facts. We're trying to rule out honest mistakes. And I really think the only way that you're going to get that is by defending the historical reliability of the Gospels. And again, this isn't saying like, well, the Gospels are reliable. This is what happened. It's just saying these are the kind of authors that they are. And so this is the testimony that goes back to the original eyewitnesses. And so what's the best explanation for this testimony? If they made it in a hostile audience, it's unlikely that they're lying. And if they are making this testimony, and if this is their testimony, all these physical details, then it's really, really, really unlikely that they were simply mistaken, right? You can't mistake that. And so yeah, there you have it. So, all right, challenges or even doubters. Let's say you have doubts about Christianity, you doubt the resurrection. If there's nobody that's going to challenge me, I do not mind at all trying to help any Christians who maybe have questions or doubts about the reliability of the Gospels or the resurrection. You're also welcome to come up. You don't have to show your face. You just have to come on camera and talk. Not come on camera. You just have to come on stage and talk. And yeah, I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions. We can go into more details and all that other stuff. I'm here for the next available for the next hour and a half. This is only 30 minutes. I thought I'd have at least a handful of people ready to come up, challenge me on this. Muslims, I don't know, Christian or non-Christians, atheists, agnostics, whoever you are. So yeah, we'll wait for you. Do I play some hold music? Do burr, 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 burr. What is that, like the Wii Shop or something? I don't know. Wii Sports. Now I think I think you all can see why I do a lot of faceless reading scripts. Like this is like awkwardness. I'm probably the most socially awkward human being on the face of the planet. But hey, I'm stepping out there. I want to talk to people. I want to talk to people face to face, or whatever. Just kind of give myself the opportunity to do that kind of a thing, right? I mean, it's one thing to just present a 5-minute video, but it's a whole other thing to be able to talk to people. And honestly, when I'm able to talk to people just on the street in real life, it's awesome. It's fun. And so I probably enjoy arguing about this kind of stuff more than I like talking about it with people that already agree with me, So we'll give you a little bit of time. I can wait for 5 minutes. If nobody comes up, I might close it. That's weird. It's weird. If you guys got questions, again, send me a super chat. I don't see any. Oh, there's one. Oh, there's Brian. Okay, let's say the probability of gospel unreliability is low. Hold on, Brian. I'll get to you real quick here, buddy. I don't know why I can't show this. There we go. All right, solar X PvP. Let's say the probability of gospel unreliability is low. Isn't the probability of someone rising from the dead low? Yeah, sure. It depends on the context, right? And so, first of all, I don't think the probability of gospel or probability of gospel unreliability. Okay, I see what you're saying. I misunderstood it. And so, true. But when you rule out honest mistakes and you rule out lies, then even though there's a very low probability, it doesn't matter. Enough evidence, any claim with low probability can be overcome with enough evidence, right? And so this is just kind of like a Humean objection to miracles right here. And so people will say, well, it's always more likely that people are lying or people are deceived. Well, no, it's like, it just depends on the actual evidence, right? And so if it's possible that atheism is false and that there is a God, just even possible, right? How else would he make himself known if he wanted to give somebody a revelation? It would have to be through a miracle, right? And so the prior probability of a miracle can't be so low that it can't be swamped with enough evidence, right? And so if we could just rule out honest mistakes or lies, then I think the resurrection goes through. That's like a really simplified way to put it. If you're looking for the complicated way of putting it, check out Tim and Lydia McGrew's article in the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology. Their chapter, actually, I should say, on the resurrection, and they do all the Bayes stuff and all that other stuff. Get through one more super chat, and then I have a couple guests. All right, I appreciate you guys coming up. Smoky Plain, thank you for the generous super chat. That is very kind of you. Testify Apologetics, you should do a collab with another Christian YouTuber named Orthodox Kyle. Yeah, I like Kyle. I've watched a few of his videos. I myself am not Orthodox, but I respect orthodoxy. I find myself, intrigued by it. And so, yeah, I'd be happy to talk with Kyle. He does a lot of, even on the things like, we might not agree on everything, but I think he's really informed on his particular position. And I think he's a good apologist for orthodoxy. And I also think he does a good job when he's dealing with Islam or atheism and different things like that. And so we would definitely have a lot of agreement there. And he just seems like a good dude. So I've talked to him before in his comments, and yeah, I would love to do it. So Kyle, if you're out there, feel free to hit me up. All right. So we got Brian on the stage here. Brian,
hello.
Hey, sir. So I understand you are a Christian, but you're having doubts about your faith. And so how can I help you out,
I'm
man?
kind of nervous. Here. I never been on a live stream before, but this is my first time.
Yeah, it's just having a conversation, man. We're good. We're good.
Okay. Okay. So I came here because I know I have to speak for this, but like I didn't study Christianity well, even though I've been getting to the faith and I've been getting to like, let's just say the basics. Okay.
Yeah.
So, so I've been seeing the other side and seeing Islam, and some parts are persuasive, but there's other parts that, of course, I immediately reject. So the reason I'm here is because I came here with a lot of doubts because of these people that I watch. I think you've heard of them. One of them was on debate with Chris from Speaker's Corner. I think Dean Responds. I think you know who he is.
Oh, okay.
Uh, and another one was a small YouTuber when I watched him, Muslim Orthodoxy. I think you know him too.
Yep. Yeah, I'm familiar
Yeah.
with them.
And
So
I've
what?
seen some. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say. So what in particular would be bothering you? Like, what questions would you have?
Okay, so the questions are from the divinity like of Christ speaking. For example, in Mark 10:18, even though it has been refuted many times, I think it's Jesus says, "Why do you call me good? There's
Mhm.
none good but God." And I and that kind of bothered me a little bit because like, does this deny Jesus being God, or is this just or Jesus is just saying how to say it. I don't know how to phrase it, but may you please answer this? Like, why did
Yeah.
Jesus say this?
Does he deny being good there?
No, I don't see him denying being good.
Does he then issue a command to? He tells them about the 10 Commandments, right? And he says, "Did you follow? Have you
Yeah,
followed these commandments?" Right. And so
yeah,
and then on top of that, he adds another commandment, and he tells the man to sell everything that he has and follow him. And then
okay.
if he does that, he will have eternal life. So
Oh,
think about it for just a second. He doesn't deny that he's good. He then goes over the 10 Commandments and is like, okay, great. You followed all of
mm-hmm,
those. And a normal Jew would be like, well, I'm good then, right? I'm good. And he says,
uh-huh,
I have one more command. This is what you need to do. And so
okay,
he issues a command, and then he says, anybody who's forsaken mother, father, land, all that other kind of stuff, family, will receive eternal life in this life, right? And so,
so
like, who
sorry,
gives you?
sorry,
Well, like, think about it. Like, who really has that kind of authority that, like, I'm giving that person eternal life, right? It's like it kind of
mm-hmm,
harkens back to John 5:26, where it says that the Son has life in it, or the Father has life in Himself, and that the Son has
uh-huh,
life, and then the Son gives life to those who He like chooses to give it to, that who believe in Him and all that other kind of stuff. And
mm,
so, like, and then you can't just look at like Mark chapter 10 in isolation. You also have to look at like the rest of Mark or the rest of the Gospels.
Context.
Yeah, so like in Mark, like at the very beginning, let me see if I can pull it up here. Give me just a second. I'm just pulling up
Yeah.
some a verse here. Mark 1.
Thank God that this came at the right time because like today I didn't have a good day, and like mainly because of the doubts and
Sure.
because of the debates and all that, I've been feeling kind of distant from God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I understand. I work with a ministry called Talk About Doubts, and we talk to
Yeah, I heard of
people
it.
like
Talk
that all
about
the
doubts.
time. Yeah, and if this like what I'm giving you here is just like a sampler, we have people who are part of the team who are extremely educated and have doctorates and degrees that are more intelligent than I am. That we can do like 2-on-1 or 1-on-1 kind of thing. But I'll just go through
Uh-huh.
some basic stuff here. So let's just look at the opening of Mark's gospel. It says, "The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, as it is written in the prophet Isaiah. Look, I am sending my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way. The voice of one shouting in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord, make his path straight." Okay, and so prepare whose way?
Christ's way.
Jesus, right? Okay. So
Hmm.
Isaiah, are you familiar with Isaiah chapter 40? Like, what is the context there? A messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way. That's
Uh,
actually, this is Malachi. Excuse me. I should get my references right. He mixes Malachi and Isaiah at the same time. So let me bear with me here. Ahead of
yeah. Which kind of leads
um
me to another question, and I'm not gonna try to get off topic here, but like because like some prophecies in like Matthew or Luke, some of them or Mark basically, some of the prophecies like they quote certain passages when I think it's Matthew chapter 1 when Jesus fled to Egypt as a baby.
yeah,
And it's supposed to be the direct prophecy out of Egypt I have called my son. I think it's
right.
in Hosea.
Yeah,
So that yeah, one
yeah,
of
I know
those
what you're talking
YouTubers,
about.
yeah,
Go,
Muslim Orthodoxy, even though I think his comment section is against him. I think he said that it has no, when you look at the context, it has no reference to Jesus or anything.
Well,
That's what I think.
he's not entirely wrong about some of that, but he's mangling it, right? And
Uh-huh.
I'll tell you how in just a second. Okay, so we'll just do one thing at a time here, right? So the opening of Mark,
Yeah, my bad.
he quotes Matt. No, you're totally fine. You're totally good, man. So at the very beginning, like I said, he quotes this and he says that the messenger before his face will prepare his way. Well, he's quoting Malachi chapter 3, verses 1, which is talking about Yahweh himself coming to the temple, right?
Okay.
And so let me just show you the verse real quick. Malachi, behold, I send my messenger, he will prepare your way before me, and the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple. So he's talking about the Lord, right? But here he's
Uh-huh.
talking about John the Baptist referring to Jesus. Okay. And then if you go to this one, the next one, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight. Again, the referent here is Jesus, but yet he's quoting Isaiah 43. In Isaiah 43, a voice cries in the wilderness, prepare a way for Yahweh or the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. So why did Matthew, or excuse me, did Mark just have amnesia in chapter 10? And like if he didn't think Jesus was God, like if at the very beginning, in the very prologue of his book, like he's identifying him as God coming to the temple and the way of the Lord being prepared, right? That he is the Lord, that he is Yahweh. And so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And this is just like one example from like the very first three verses. And so I find that it's like really disingenuous and dishonest of these Muslim
Mm-hmm.
apologists to just ignore all of these other passages and just kind of like focus in. But they have to do that because they have to say, oh, okay, well, like your Bible is corrupt. And so we'll just pick the
It's only
stuff that
corrupt when it's convenient.
it's only corrupt when it's convenient. So they have to cherry pick, which is just it's a logical fallacy. So they have to cherry pick when it's convenient and it suits their narrative, and then they have to ignore everything else around it. And so, I mean, this is just chapter 1. You go to chapter 2, of course, Jesus is forgiving a paralytic man's sins, which the scribes criticize him, and he reads their thoughts, like, and then he says, you know, like, to show you that I have the power, to just a mere prophet. He says, like, I will show you that the Son of Man has authority to forgive sins. And of course, the Son of Man is referring to a divine figure in Daniel 7:13-14, which is, pull that up here, who is basically co-equal with God. So this is something that was already in the Jewish thought, right? The Jewish theology, that there would be this person called the Son of Man who would, with the clouds of heaven, come to the Ancient of Days and be given dominion and glory in a kingdom, and that all peoples, nations, and languages would serve him. And his dominion will be an everlasting dominion, which will not pass away. His kingdom shall not be destroyed. And so this Son of Man figure basically is like co-ruler, co-regent with God, and he rides the clouds of heaven. And if you know anything, there's like this motif all throughout the Psalms, all throughout the prophets, where Yahweh is the cloud rider. I think it's in 19:1. If I get this one wrong, yeah. So behold, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud and comes to Egypt, right? And so, like, that's something that is applied here to this Son of Man figure. And then if you go back and look at Daniel with this everlasting kingdom stuff, if you remember, Daniel just got thrown in the lion's den, and Darius was like worried about him. He wanted him to live because he realized that he was basically brought up on some drummed up charges or whatever. And this is what Darius says. He says, I make a decree that in my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall have no end. And so then Daniel, in using the very same language, talks about this is the kingdom of the Son of Man, has this exact same thing. He's Yahweh, right? And so, and then one more. This is again in Mark. This is him on trial. The high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, have you no answer to make? What is this that these men testify against you? But he remained silent and made no answer. And again, the high priest asked him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? Jesus said, I am, and you will see the Son of Man. So now he's directly claiming it right before the high priest. I am the Son of Man, seated at the right hand of power. Like, this is, again, referring to what we see in Daniel, also referring to Psalm 110, where it talks about the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make all of your enemies your footstool. Anyways, he says, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand in power, coming in the clouds of heaven. So again, he's saying, I'm the cloud rider. I am deity here, guys. I am your judge. Like, you're not judging me. I'm judging, like, I'm coming back to judge you, right? And they says they tore their garments. What further witnesses do we need? And they basically said that this is and then you have heard this blasphemy, right? And so it's blasphemous in Jewish law to basically make yourself out to be God. And yet here he is claiming this exalted authority, claiming to be the Son of Man, claiming to have this everlasting kingdom, claiming to be his judge, claiming to come in the clouds of heaven, which is something that only Yahweh would do. And so these guys need to read more than just Mark chapter 10 to suit their narrative. Does that make sense? Okay. So there's one thing about this Hosea thing. Let me show you here. Since you had a couple of questions here. Out of Egypt, I called my son. I want to say it's in Egypt.
It's in Hosea.
It's in Hosea, correct. It's quoted by Matthew. Okay. And when they departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Rise, take the child and mother and flee to Egypt. Remain there until I tell you. For Herod is about to search for the child and destroy him. And he rose, he took the child and the mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord has spoken by the prophet, out of Egypt call my son. Well, I just went through this, if you remember on the slides there. Let me see if I could bring those back up here. Share this tab instead, and then present. Go back. Yeah, there we go. Out of Egypt I call my son, right? And so this whole thing with Archelaus, this is the very same context, right? In Matthew chapter 2, Joseph's returning from Egypt, and we don't know. Archelaus is not even mentioned in any of the other gospels. We just read in Matthew 2:22 that Joseph heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father. He was afraid to go there. And so Josephus fills in the picture because he tells us that the kingdom was divided, that part of the kingdom was given to Archelaus, where he was going back in Bethlehem, right? And so Archelaus basically, to squash this protest, sent 3,000 horsemen, sent multiple horsemen and slaughtered 3,000 Jewish worshipers in the temple and canceled Passover. So what I want you to see here, Brian, is that this is like a strong mark of history right in the middle of this particular story. Now, I understand that like what Matthew's doing is like taking some license and like obviously the context of Hosea 11:1 is probably referring to Israel, right? But he's saying that like Jesus is the embodied Israel. Jesus is also God's son, and that like why would he read if this was just like a story that was made up? This isn't a messianic prophecy, right? Alfred Edersheim is a scholar who went through the Talmuds, the Targums, and a bunch of different Jewish literature. He found 456 prophecies about the Messiah. Guess what? Hosea 11:1, it wasn't one of them. So think about it this way. Flip this argument completely on its head for just a second. If this is something that is just like, if he's trying to make Jesus look like the Messiah, why is he using Hosea 11:1 if this didn't happen? But if it did happen, then he's getting a little creative, sure. But it's like this, he's using it because it's based on a like actual true event. You know what I'm saying? And so you might think that it's kind of like overly creative or something like that. But I mean, Paul does similar things when he's talking in like Galatians about like Hagar and Sarah, and like it's just kind of like a midrash kind of interpretation that fits within. If you've ever read the like the Targums or Talmud, it's just like license that they sometimes take, but he's just showing that Jesus is the fulfillment. Does that make sense?
A little bit, because like I'm trying to keep up with what you're saying. It's just that I have not studied that much. So what do you? So basically, I don't understand that much. You like, clarify a little bit on what it is again? I'm
Say
listening.
again. No, what's that again? I didn't hear you.
Can you I didn't really understand.
Sure. So what I'm saying is we have tons of records of what messianic prophecies were about the Messiah. And
Mhm.
Hosea 11:1 is not one of them. So if Matthew is inventing a story to make Jesus look like the Messiah, he's not going to use Hosea 11:1 unless this is based on an event that actually happened. And then what I'm saying here is that based on this particular story that I gave about Archelaus and how it's confirmed by Josephus, even though Matthew doesn't fully give an explanation and neither does Josephus, these two stories fit together, they dovetail together, they both provide different bits of information that explain Joseph's fear. And so it's like a mark of historicity because it's like, oh, yeah, Archelaus is a homicidal maniac, just like his father. I probably shouldn't go back to Bethlehem. Let me go to Nazareth instead, where a different son, where Archelaus isn't actually ruling. Does that make sense?
Oh, so Archelaus was ruling during the times of um. I mean, it was not around Jesus' time, was it? I don't think so.
No, he ended up basically being kicked because of this kind of attitude that he showed, and that he never really got his authority certified. He basically like didn't last very long. He got fired basically, and so yeah, but Joseph is like, okay, I'm not going back to live under the rule of another homicidal maniac. And so
Oh,
let's go north instead. Let's go to Nazareth. Let's relocate.
so that's
But
how. So it's similar to in Hosea, basically,
yeah,
in the same
yeah.
place.
Well, it's like he's already coming out of Egypt, and like I said, it's not like it's he might be getting creative with this particular prophecy, but if he's just inventing a story about a Messiah, he's got 456 verses that he could use if he wanted to make something up. But instead, what we see is marks of historicity. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm a little bit more. So
Okay.
yeah, because I don't. It's because like I really do not on my free time. Like I don't study like those scholars. Like
Sure.
I've heard of some though, like
Yeah.
Craig Keener and because most scholars I heard of from are from either you or Inspiring Philosophy. You know who that Mike Jones?
Yeah. We just did a live together Monday.
Yeah, yeah. You refuted a Dean responds, and it's a very cool life.
It
That's the
was,
time.
no, that was, we were talking about Rhett and Alex O'Connor on that one.
Oh
Deep
yeah, I
responses
remember
with
that.
David Wood and Chris at Speaker's Corner and Jai and
You were
DOC.
still there though.
Yeah, I was there.
Yes. I was
Um,
actually wondering what happened to Giant DOC. I think their channel got the boot.
yeah, I think a bunch of people started reporting them and something got confused and they didn't do anything wrong. And YouTube is not being very helpful to fix, which really sucks because they're extremely knowledgeable. So
Okay.
Brian, I'm gonna move on because I got a couple other people waiting. But here's what I want to say. I just want to give you one word of advice, okay? From talking to a lot
Okay.
of people who are in your position, um, they will you like you said it yourself. I'm not super knowledgeable about like the historicity of the gospels and different things like that. But you're watching a lot of content on YouTube, right? And so
Yes.
one of the things that I would really recommend, like I can't recommend this strongly enough, is if Christianity is even possibly true, right? And it seems to me like you believe it, you want to believe it.
I want to,
But
yeah.
yeah, but you have some doubts and different things like that. The best thing for you to do is not to just get all your information necessarily from YouTube, even though like it would be really self-serving for me to say like, yeah, follow YouTube and follow me, right? The best thing to do is to take a little bit of a break. Don't rack yourself with all these doubts and be like, well, if my faith is really true, I can withstand like listening to all this criticism all the time. I'm saying first, find the best arguments for Christianity by reading books. And if you go in my description of any of my previous videos, I have a whole list of books you can read. A lot of them are for free. Okay. So
Okay.
be able to steel man the strongest case for Christianity. And then at that point, definitely like read the hardest critics. I don't have any problem with that. We're not hiding anything here, right? But you at least want
Yeah.
to be able to go in like, okay, I know at least the best arguments for Christianity. Now I'll do this. But what a lot of people do is they make this mistake of like, well, if Christianity is true, then like I guess I can just listen to whatever and blah blah blah. And you're not in a position to really do that. Like I sit and watch like Dan McClellan and Bart Ehrman and like the hardest critics against Christianity that I can find and read their books or watch their videos, but not they don't bother me really because I have all this positive evidence already under my belt. And what a lot of people do is they just make this mistake of just like throwing themselves into the deep end without knowing even like good arguments for Christianity. Like if they were to like run into a knowledgeable believer and just try to say, okay, as a devil's advocate, let me play skeptic, they'll also get demolished. And so like be able to steel man both sides, and then I think you'll feel less distressed. And again, reach
Mhm.
out to talkaboutdoubts.com, fill out a form. And if you want to talk one-on-one with like me or other people, we would be more than happy to do that. And you don't have to do it just once. Like we've done multiple calls with people. So does that help?
Okay.
Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah, and it's a good thing because at least I know that I actually have somebody to talk about these doubts because
Yeah.
usually I'm not that one who goes on call shows or
Yeah.
lives,
No,
but I'm like
most
I'm
people
always in the
aren't.
comments.
Yeah, most people
Yeah.
aren't. This is just like a taste of kind of this is just a sampler of the kind of stuff that we discuss. So, well, Brian, I appreciate that. I hope that helps a little bit, and just know that you have that resource out there to help you, and we'll be able to get all kinds of good materials and stuff in your hands that I think can really help make you feel more solid.
Yeah, I need to learn to like to read, because like I'm not that guy who reads, but maybe I'll see if I could check those things out.
Yeah, there's other resources we can point you to, audio resources and different things too. So,
okay, thank you so much.
All right, brother. Appreciate you. Good meeting you.
Bye.
All right. All right. So, Mac, I'm going to add a couple. There's a couple more of you waiting, so I'll bring you up in a second. Just a real quick super chat. Faith Walker, $100 super chat. Thank you so much. It's very generous of you. This was never truly mine, only online from the Lord, just passing it along, as all good things come from him and return to him. Thank you. Thank you very much. It says, great job. Keep up the good work. Praise God. So thank you so much, sir. I appreciate the generous donation. That's awesome. Many returns to you. And so, Max, you're on the stage, sir.
Hey, Marty. What's up?
Yo, the real Marty.
Yeah.
I demand your obedience.
So I'm agnostic, but I would like to be Christian. I would really want to believe it, but I have a few objections to it. The first one I want to bring up is Revelation 16:12, which talks about how the river Euphrates gets dried up. And if you go on Google right now, it's actually projected to dry up completely by 2040. So my question is, if this doesn't happen, what would it bode for Christianity, like as the religion?
I'm not going to claim to be like an expert in eschatology or revelation or different things like that. I'm just going to be like completely honest with you. This isn't like a topic that I've looked into as deeply as maybe some others. And so some people take a futurist interpretation of Revelation. Revelation is also written in like a kind of genre that is like highly apocalyptic, highly symbolic, and different things like that. And so, and some people kind of take that this is like a lot of the stuff in Revelation is past. And so there's different views on Revelation. And so I would not say that like, if this doesn't happen, like that would make Christianity false. If Jesus didn't resurrect from the dead, that would make Christianity false, right? If there was like other kind of evidence that came against Christianity, but just like this particular thing in a book that's like highly symbolic, like, yeah, I don't know how much I would really put into that. So, that's probably not like the most helpful answer. This is just not a topic I've studied as much. So,
well, I mean, I just don't know how like it would bode for Christianity, like because it mentions the river by name, of course, and obviously as we get closer to that date, a lot of people are gonna like be speculating, like, is Jesus coming back soon? Are we in the end times? Stuff like that.
Yeah, I've never really seen this discussed. So yeah, I'm sorry, man.
No, you're
if you
good.
got something else, you got like objections against the Gospels or like philosophical problems with miracles
I have a little
or
bit more.
Something like that, I'm probably more helpful there. But just being honest with you, I don't spend ton of time studying Revelation.
No worries. So in that one verse where Jesus says, "No man knows the day or the hour, not even the Son," how could he not know the day or the hour if he's God? Like, if he is this all-knowing being in human form, how could he lack information of anything? Like, how could he not know the day or the hour?
Well, I mean, he also asked when a woman touched the hem of his garment, like, who touched me? You could say that he's being kind of like hyperbolic there or something. I don't know. But the part of the incarnation is that like he's not like, he's still human. He's God. He's fully 100% divine, but he's also 100% man. And so like he had to eat, he slept. And so I don't see this as like a major objection of him like not knowing something. Now, Avery, God Logic, he answers this a little bit differently. And if you just like go to YouTube and just do a quick search, like Mark 13:32, no man knows the day or the hour or something like that. He has a different approach to that, but I just point to the incarnation and point to there was other times where like Jesus didn't know who touched him. He looked around. He was trying to find the person. I don't think he was just pretending. I don't think he was just kind of playing and hoping that this woman would come up. I just think that it says also in Luke 2:52 that he grew in wisdom and stature. Well, like if he's God, like why would he need to grow in wisdom and in stature, right?
Yeah,
And like,
that's another thing that doesn't really make sense to me because like
sure,
ontologically he is God. He's all knowing. So it would
but if
seem to me like even as like a baby, he should be all knowing in some sense, and like
right,
I wouldn't really see him as like growing in knowledge or anything like that.
right, but this is something that even though like the gospel writers, as I just talked to with the previous caller had like high view of Jesus and basically were calling him God, like worshiping him. Jesus is forgiving people's sins. He's doing all these different things. He's doing only what God can do by like commanding the winds and the waves. And they're like, what manner of man is this? He's claiming to be the judge of all the world. He's saying that if you obey me, I'll give you eternal life. He's doing all these things, but at the same time, at the exact same time, like he's growing in knowledge. Like sometimes he's ignorant, he sleeps, he gets tired, he eats, he does all these different things. And so it's just the hypostatic union. There's 100%, he's 100% God in his, but he took upon human flesh and he's still 100% man. And so he chose to limit himself in certain ways. And so is it a contradiction? I don't think so. Is it kind of mysterious? Sure.
For sure, yeah.
But I don't think that it's just like enough. And so for me now, I look at stuff a little bit differently. Like I'm not like I look at things like, okay, what does this teach? And then is this book not just like claiming to be inspired, but is it historically reliable? Do these sayings actually go back to Jesus and his disciples? And so the whole point of the earlier argument of like, look at all these clues of why the gospels are historically reliable and trustworthy. Then we can like kind of wrestle with the theology, but let's just say like we don't fully understand it. Like God is bigger than us. He can do things that are kind of a little bit beyond our comprehension. We would expect that. And so
Sure.
I try to look at the light of like what's clear in the light of what's maybe a little more difficult. And what's clear to me, at least, is that the people who wrote the gospels were close up to the facts. They were knowledgeable, and they were trying to be honest. They were trying to get it right. And so if this goes, then these kind of sayings go back to Jesus and these deeds go back to Jesus. And like they're saying these two things, well, then you have to wrestle philosophically with how those work. But like, even if you can't fully understand it in a way that like, oh yeah, this completely 100% satisfies everything about my intellect, you could still go, okay, well, I still have tons of reasons to think that what they're saying is true. And is there a logical contradiction here? Actually, there's not. It's just maybe a little bit mysterious, but
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
like for 600 years before church councils, they're explaining like, how do we understand the Trinity or the hypostatic union and different things like that. And I think they came up with a lot of, good answers for those things. But again, some of those things can get kind of deep and kind of complicated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Another objection that I've heard a lot of atheists bring up, like Alex O'Connor, and it's actually one that like I struggle to like reconcile with, is like the geography of religion. Like you're based on where you're born, that's what shapes your beliefs. And it really doesn't make sense to me why like God would allow maybe some people to be born on an island like the Senegalese, or people to be born in a Muslim country where they're forced into Islam, or they're in China, or
Sure.
anywhere in Asia, like anywhere that isn't Christian. Like
Yeah. So this is kind of more of like a philosophical kind of objection. And so again, I just go back to, are these documents like reliable? Do they go back to Jesus? And so if that's the case, then Christianity is true. And so it also, they point to a God who is fair, a God who is just. And so I don't think God is just sending anybody to hell just because they're ignorance. I think people go to hell because of their sin and how they respond to what revelation that they actually have. And so I don't think anybody's just like, I don't think, like Abraham, when he's arguing with God about over Sodom and Gomorrah, he's like, will the God of all the earth, not do what is just, will not do what is right. And so we can expect God to be just. We can expect God to be fair. And so are people born in certain countries that don't have access to certain things? I mean, I guess so. I don't know. Like, I hear all these stories about people in Muslim countries having dreams and visions of Jesus and coming to Christ that way. And so I don't see how that couldn't be happening in other places. I mean, these are like actual testimonies and accumulation of dozens of them that we've heard, and so we have that. And you don't want to judge a truth just based on like geography or whatever. Like that's just the genetic fallacy. You know what I'm saying? And so something is true based on whether it's true or whether it's not true. So does that make sense?
Yeah. Another question I have, like, because before Islam, the Arabic world, I'm pretty sure they were like Christian. They were like in the church. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not an expert on Arabic history or anything like that. But my question is, the trajectory of Christianity was going great in Africa until Muhammad came along, and Muhammad, rewrote what the Gospels had teached. And I don't really see why, if the Christian God is the one true God, why he would allow Africa to become this, Islamic continent, when he could have just had the entire continent become Christian, like Europe or like North or South America. Um, and like some people are born into Islam and they don't really get a chance to hear about the gospel because the Quran is forced down their throat. And
I don't know, man. So think about it this way: in Islam, it teaches some things about Jesus, that he's a prophet, right? It teaches that there's one God. I think if you're somebody who is a Muslim and you're reading this book, you're learning that there's one God. You're learning that there's prophets. You're also seeing issues probably in the Quran if you're paying enough attention and you're just a thinking person. That it's like, why are they like going so hard at denying him being a son? And yet he has the power to like turn clay birds into like real birds. And like he has the power to raise the dead and all of this other stuff. And so it kind of, if you're just a Muslim and that's all you have, you'd probably like, well, wait a second. So there's claims that come before Muhammad. What exactly are those claims? Why are people making those claims? That should be enough to like stir, I think, in some people's case, like, even though like I think Islam was like used for bad, somebody could just read the Quran and have questions and find their way to Jesus. Do you know what I'm saying? And so
yeah.
And so it leaves all these holes, all these problems, and it makes you kind of wonder and want to research a little bit more, because and then, I mean, I don't know if you've ever read the Quran, but it's basically somebody just like, why do you guys reject me? Why do you guys reject me? I'm in your book. I'm in your book. I affirm your book. I affirm your book. But it's just like, okay, well, if he affirms their book and he thinks they're in their book, but like they're saying, no, you're not in our book. And then there's these like historical claims that we could actually like look at. Somebody who I think is an honest Muslim, even if they're born into this, could go, there's something that's funky here. And
well, like before the internet, before people in the Arabic world could access different religions, the Gospels, the Quran was forced down their throat, and they didn't really have an opportunity to hear about the gospel because, if they tried seeking it out, they could be killed for apostasy or whatever. Stuff like that. I guess my question is more like, why would God allow the trajectory of Christianity to be radically altered by Islam? When if he hadn't allowed Muhammad to do that, the world could be a much better place. Christianity would have billions of more followers, stuff like that.
Well, what you're asking is basically the problem of evil. Do you think there's any good reason that God could allow any kind of evil to happen ever?
Sure.
Okay, so if he has a good reason to allow one kind of evil, what's to say, like, would we be in a position to know, like, if he allows another form of evil?
Well,
like,
I think.
Are we in a good spot to say, okay, well, he probably had a good reason to allow this particular evil, but there's this other kind of evil. Like, are we in a good spot to say, like, well, if he allowed this, are we in a good spot to say, well, why would he allow this or why would he allow that?
I think it's ultimately unknowable, but I can see the benefits Christianity has had on the world. And
so what you got to do, Max, is when you're looking at the problem of evil, I understand. Like it's a good argument against Christianity to a certain extent, right? Because it's like, why would an all good God and an all powerful God allow certain kinds of evil, certain kinds of suffering into the world, including like Muslim persecution of Christians and making it more difficult to hear the gospel rather than to all that other kind of stuff, right? So I understand that, but if you just look at that in a vacuum, right, and you don't look at, say, like arguments for the existence of God, or just reasoning yourself to, like, can this existence kind of pop out uncaused out of nothing, with all the appearance of like design and beauty and all this other stuff? Do we have like a moral conscience and intuition that is best explained by there being no God, or is this better explained by there being a God? And then what about like the claims of Christianity? Are there reasons to think that those are actually like true? And then what do we do with that? And then what do we do with modern miracles? And so if you're just focused on like this one thing, why would God allow that? I might not have like a completely 100% satisfactory answer for every single thing that God allows or doesn't allow. I know that sometimes he seems to allow something, and I think there's good reasons why he could allow certain things, like bringing good out of evil, or you know some kind of like soul building kind of thing for certain people in certain situations, or um, just a number of different things that he could bring good out of evil from a number of different things. So if he could do it one thing, then he could do it in other things, even if I don't fully understand. But again, I have to go back and I have to look at what's clear in light of what's not clear. And so, yeah, it's a tough objection. Like, I feel its force, and I'm probably not like the most philosophical person to answer the problem of evil. But then I have to look at all the positive evidence and go, okay, well, do the gospel suddenly stop being reliable? Is there suddenly not good evidence that there is miracles? Are there certain not good evidence that miracles happened in the past? Are there not good evidence that miracles happen today? Does all of a sudden, like, the arguments from design and cosmological arguments, moral arguments and things like that, did those just like get completely swallowed up with the Muslims came and invaded parts of Africa and kind of messed things up? Like, no, not necessarily. I mean, like, I don't think so. And so I might have questions. It might be like a little bit of a tension in my worldview, but any worldview that you have is going to have anomalous data, right? Any good theory that you have for anything is going to have some anomalous data that you can't explain, even like with like evolution or something like that. There's still things that kind of go against it that's anomalous that people don't really have a way to explain. And so that's just the way that you have to kind of look at these things. Like, and so can we explain everything? No, but I have to kind of go with like what points in the right direction. And like in Christianity, like, God doesn't just stand way far away. He gets his hands dirty. He enters into this world, and he himself allows himself to be crucified.
Yeah.
He experiences suffering more than like a lot of people. He takes one of the most excruciating deaths a human can make. And so, no, I don't have all the answers, but too much is pointing one way to just go, okay, well, yeah, that's
No worries, no worries.
yeah.
So I guess my question is, how can we trust the gospels? How can we trust that what we have wasn't altered? How can we trust that there aren't contradictions in the Bible? Because if I were to convert to Christianity, one of the things that I would want is for the Bible to be inerrant, because I want to believe that this is God's perfect inerrant word.
Well,
And even like stuff like textual or translation errors, that calls into question like the inerrancy of
yeah, no, I don't think so. I'll answer this one, and then I need to
that's
move
just
on to the
like
next.
how
Yeah.
I feel about it.
Yeah, no, well, don't take your own like assumptions on the way that it should be, and be like, well, it's got to be like inerrant, even in the autographs, 100%. Like, God had to come upon the scribes and the copyists and just like make them dictate it. Like that's really brutal. I don't know like why we would want to expect that. If God is using human beings and that's what he wants to do, then that's fine. I would just say, like, you don't want your faith to just be in like, how good can people copy something? You ultimately want to know, like, do the gospels show that Jesus made certain claims about himself, and was he really resurrected from the dead? And so if any, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. when you have human testimony, there are three things that are possible. Either somebody's telling the truth, somebody's lying, or somebody's seriously, honestly mistaken, right? That's what you would need. We could always imagine having more evidence for that and everything being perfect. We live in heaven. There's no pain. There's no suffering. There's no evil. Every time God communicates to us, it's 100% like sparkling clear, written on like a scroll of gold that comes down from an angel and descends and hands it to us. When we read it and go, oh yeah, that's what he's saying. Like we could imagine that being possible, but like that's not what we need in order to be rational. We just need to rule out honest mistakes and lies. And so what I would say, Max, is like study the arguments for the reliability of the gospel. Inspiring Philosophy has a really good playlist on this. I have some playlists on this in all the descriptions of my videos, not in this one yet. I have books that I would recommend that you read. But I think your epistemology is like everything must be perfect, and if it's God, and I think that's like a little, we're fallen human beings, right? If this stuff is true. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
blathering a little bit. But.
No, you're good. So excluding like textual inconsistencies, because that's not really a big deal. Grammar, that stuff doesn't matter. Are there any logical contradictions in the Bible and the Gospels? Like one thing says one thing and the other thing says a completely different thing, and they can't really be reconciled any other way. And it's not like a grammatical or
I don't think that there is like something like that exactly necessarily, but I mean, I think even if like the gospel writers made honest mistakes, that wouldn't be like destroy Christianity, right? And so like, let's say it says that like after Jesus was circumcised and they presented him to the temple, it says they just kind of like went up to Nazareth after that. Okay. Where Matthew has this more elaborate story that we already talked about earlier in the stream. And all this other stuff. But like, what if Luke just didn't know about all that? Like, what if he just had part of the story, just assumed like nothing else really happened after that, and he just wrote in what he assumed and he made an honest mistake? Would that, like somebody making an honest mistake about a historical fact, necessarily prove that like this isn't from God? No, it just means he's reporting something it's an honest mistake. But if he gets hundreds of other details right, and it's shown that he's a traveling companion with Paul, and it's shown that he has access to the disciples and is able to meet with them in Jerusalem, and he's claiming that he has all these sources, and everywhere we can check him, he's right on dozens of things about archaeology, about customs, about local rulers, and all of these titles of local officials, trade routes, travel routes, all this other stuff. Then it's like when he's telling you these other things, he's probably being honest about at least what people are telling him and reporting it to you. And then you can decide, like, is this something that they could honestly be mistaken about? Or is this something that these people are lying about? But why are they lying about it if they're willing to suffer for it? So,
so I've heard the martyrdom argument, and one objection that I've heard is that at least like over half of the martyrs, so-called martyrs that we have, they come from like centuries later, but some of them are legitimate. Like Paul is probably legitimate, Peter's probably legitimate, but like the other ones, they're like sort of
well,
abstract.
What we want to say, this is the last thing I'll answer, then I got to move on to the others. But I have some videos on this. I just put out one not that long ago in reference to Alex O'Connor. I think that Acts is a highly reliable historical book, and it shows that they were willing to suffer, and James was willing to pay the price. Paul was actually persecuting Christians. Stephen was stoned. Now, he wasn't maybe a witness of Jesus, but that's sending a warning shot, and yet they still preached. And so I have a stream on that. You can check that out. I also have a video where I respond to Alex O'Connor on that. And so I don't think that like Christians should say, oh yeah, we know that they were all martyred. 100%. We know why they were martyred. Like, no, that's overstating the evidence. But if they were willing to suffer and risk their necks, even after like companions of theirs were killed, that tells you that they were probably not lying. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Paul's testimony is like pretty powerful in my opinion. But like one other one comes from, I forget his name, but he like goes to India and they like kill him. Yeah. And I just don't know if like stuff like the martyrdom accounts like that can be really trusted, because apparently the earliest mention comes
Right.
from like centuries later.
Right. Yeah. Again, we don't want to overstate the case. Sean McDowell recently revised his book on this whole thing. And so that's another resource I would recommend. And so appreciate all the good questions, Max. Those are good. I'm glad you're thinking about this stuff. Check out the books that I recommended. Check out talkaboutdoubts.com too if you have further questions. If you really want to talk to like a philosopher about the problem of evil, that's where you could go. I'm not that, but they can put you in touch with somebody who is, and you can talk one-on-one with them.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good night.
All right, brother. Yep. Thanks. All right, Ben. I appreciate you waiting, sir. I've been waiting for a while. So, what you got?
So I was just going to bring up a couple things, I guess, that you said before. I'm sure I could like argue about every point that you've made. Don't you think that the Herod's son in Matthew, and Matthew using the passage from Hosea, but that also is just something that works internally for Matthew as an author, because Matthew has to get Jesus to Bethlehem or to Nazareth. I mean,
I don't think he has to get him there. I mean, there's so many different ways. But think about how does Luke have to come up with something elaborate in order to get him there? Does John really?
Yeah. Luke, he's living in Nazareth,
right?
So the elaborate thing is to get him to Bethlehem.
Oh, you're talking about the census?
Yeah.
Oh, because to fulfill a prophecy.
So look, Luke has a problem. Luke has Jesus starting out in Nazareth.
Correct.
Has to get him to Bethlehem and then back to Nazareth.
Right.
So he does that in just the way they go for the census, they go to the temple, and then they go back.
Yeah.
Go back home. But Matthew has the problem of Jesus is known as Jesus of Nazareth, but he also has to be born in Bethlehem. Right. So he lives in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
And then they have this whole thing, because Matthew is like basing his whole model on Moses.
Well, think about this for just a second. I don't know if I buy
babies.
I don't know if I buy the Moses thing as much, because it's not very
kings try to kill babies, and the baby has to flee to Egypt. It's like exactly what happens in Moses.
Okay, there's a lot of things here with this particular story. And so first of all, let's talk about the census for just a little bit in Luke. Okay, you said that Luke has to get Jesus to Bethlehem, and he's going to use, now think about this for a second, a giant census to get him there.
Well, the tension is because Mark doesn't have Jesus born in Bethlehem.
Mark doesn't have a birth narrative at all.
Right.
But
they say, like, isn't this Jesus of Nazareth? Like, blah, blah, blah. Call his family, he's crazy.
Sure.
There's a part in Mark where that happens.
But he's called Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah, but they're not like, also he was born in Bethlehem because he's the fucking Messiah, right?
Whoa. Hey, Ben. This is a Christian Minecraft server, sir.
So I think that like the problem, and we know that Matthew and Luke both are using Mark. So they're saying we have this guy, he's known as Jesus of Nazareth. We all know he grew up in Nazareth.
Right.
Nobody's debating that.
Right.
But also, especially Matthew has this problem of he's got to be born in Bethlehem to be the Messiah. Luke is like less concerned with that. But Luke is probably like also hearing a tradition that he was born in Bethlehem.
But hold up. So first of all, Luke and Matthew constantly call him Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah, everybody agrees.
They don't have a problem with that.
Right. Everybody.
Right. And so I understand what is Micah 5:2. Yeah. So here, let me.
Like, I think Bethlehem's birth is extremely dubious historically.
Yeah, I don't think that it is, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so the census objection, I think, is terrible.
Well, I mean, we know that there was a census, even though Luke gets a bunch of the details wrong, because he can split two different censuses.
No, he doesn't. He really doesn't.
Yeah, he does. And they would never have people go back to their hometown to be counted.
Okay, let me break it down. Let me break it down. Let me break it down real quick, because this is something I
don't want to get sidetracked on the census, but yeah. Okay.
No.
It's
okay.
Anything is fun. So just go wherever you want to go. I'll go with you.
Yeah. No worries. Hold on. I am a prophet. I foresaw this coming because I am the Mahdi. So the census, right? This is the real popular one, and you only brought it up because of a fulfilled prophecy. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think he made up the census. Again,
No, I'm not saying that you. Yeah, I'm not saying that you're
I think
saying
that's
that he
false
necessarily.
dichotomy. Like they made it all up, or like I mean, these guys could have heard these stories. I'm not saying they didn't hear these stories,
Sure.
but I'm just saying like Matthew and Luke are also like telling a story internally.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
I got you. So I'm not saying that maybe he necessarily made up the census. Maybe there was a census, but he used the census, but he gets confused about the census. Okay, so that's fine. I understand your the nuance there. And that's to force Jesus' birth in Bethlehem to fulfill the prophecy. Well, first of all, this is the normal objection here, just to be fair. Census is never required returning. This is what people will say, critics will say. They don't require people returning to their ancestral hometowns. It wasn't emperor-wide during Herod's reign. Quirinius wasn't the governor until 6 AD, a decade too late. And so they're saying that, Luke 2 is a historical mess, internally contradictory and factually false, right? But here's the thing, right? Luke doesn't say the whole empire traveled all at once, just that a decree was issued. Roman censuses unfolded over years, not weeks. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? We do have a papyrus from Egypt from Gaius Vibius Maximus that shows people were ordered to return to hometowns for registration. And Tacitus in his Annals 641 shows similar obligations in Cilicia. So Luke's claim is unusual, but it's actually not absurd, and it does fit with Roman patterns from things that we actually have evidence for. Now, your thing where there's like some issue with the timing and all that other stuff, and he messes that up. Luke 2:2, this is just one solution. There are many different solutions because the word first, protos, the way that it's used here is tricky, and there's lots of scholarly debate. And I'm not just saying, just like a Christian apologist saying this, this way is the best way or that way is the best way. This is just one solution. This is from N.T. Wright. He says that the first census was when Quirinius was governor, but the word protos can mean before, followed by a genitive, like here. In John 1:15, he was before me, John the Baptist talking about Jesus. It's the same construction. And so a better translation could be the census took place before Quirinius was governor. And here's the thing. Even if you say that's wrong, even if you're like, oh, I don't know about that. That's, you push back on that. There are other solutions. I'm not going to get into them because we could get way into the weeds. But Luke shows awareness of Herod's reign in Luke 5. And he knows that Jesus wasn't born in 6 AD. From just reading Luke 3:23, he talks about the timing, right? He also isn't confused. He knows when Quirinius governed in 86 because we read about it in Acts 5:37 when Gamaliel's talking, right? And so, hold on, just one second. Let me just finish this. So if Luke wanted to fake Jesus's birthplace, he doesn't need to create such a complex setup. He doesn't even need to use the census at all. He could have just had Jesus already in Bethlehem. The detail fits awkwardly within, with what is known in Roman administrative chaos. Luke also knew the era he was writing about, and he lived through it, and he likely had sources to the events. And so, like, if he really screwed this up, he could have been called on this. Justinian, who was hated Christian, or Julian, I'm thinking of, excuse me. He might have even had Roman records and been like, Luke screwed this up. Now I want to be careful here. I don't want to make like a weak argument from silence, but like, you think he could have been called out on this way, way before. We don't have records in any of the people who you would expect, like Celsus or Julian the Apostate, object to this particular thing. And like, this is like using a steamroller to crack a peanut. That's what I really want to say for a prophecy that Luke doesn't even mention. He never quotes Micah 5:2. If he really was trying to draw attention, I'm getting him to Bethlehem, guys, to fulfill this prophecy, he would have done that, but he doesn't. So it doesn't make any sense. So,
well, I think Luke is, like I said, I think Luke is less concerned with the prophecy. I'm sorry, my TV's like behind, so I'm watching the screen of us talking, but it's like,
oh, you're good.
So I'm throwing myself off. Yeah, I don't think Luke is as concerned with the prophecy, except that he's like trying to like dot his T's or dot his I's and cross his T's.
I get you, yeah.
I think the main concern is Matthew, and that's why Matthew's story is like way more elaborate. I mean, Luke's story is like,
but with Matthew's story though, there's all that marks of historicity though.
Silence, granted. I also think like my argument may have flaws because I think Luke had Josephus. And I think that I think Luke contradicts Josephus when it comes to this stuff. So
what if he had Josephus? Why is he contradicting Josephus?
yeah, so that's what I mean. Like that's one part of my argument that I think is like problematic.
Yeah, I would say so.
But I think like Luke, I think Luke had Josephus for other reasons. I really like the main thing that I say when it comes to all these guys is I think I give like the authors a certain latitude in how they like present the internal story that they're trying to tell. So like I don't think that they're ever like their main concern. Well, I don't want to say that they're unconcerned with historical detail, but I don't think that's like the main concern that Luke had.
Are you? Whoa. See, that's where I would argue with you a lot. Yeah, because I mean, like Luke. I mean, are you familiar with Colin Hemmer's work, the setting of Luke Acts in Hellenistic history?
I've heard of the book.
Okay, so like he's got 80. He meticulously documents like 84 different facts. I mean, let me just pull some of these up real quick.
I saw Tim McGrew's video. I think I watched one of your videos with a bunch of them too.
Okay. Yeah.
Like Luke gets, so first of all, I think Luke gets a lot of details right in the Greco-Roman world. And that makes me think like Luke is in the Greco-Roman world, which again is not like a radical belief. I mean, everyone probably says.
Yeah, but he gets details right in the Jewish world too. Like for example, the widow of Nain, right? It's in the Talmud. I don't have the reference in front of me. I could look it up.
Oh, I didn't get to make my NT right joke. I was going to say NT right, more like NT wrong.
Ayo. But no, check this out. So in the widow of Nain, right? Let me look it up here. Let me look it up. I'll just pull up Lydia's book. Give me 1 second here. Kindle is taking forever to open here.
Ah, man. I'll have to come on another time and we'll talk about undesigned coincidences.
Yeah, no, I'd like to hear it. I know the general pushback that people have. Well, I know a lot of the pushback people have. Sorry, it's taking so long. Give me 1 second here.
I mean, if I was gonna do a good job, I would have had something pulled up to like look at stuff too. I'm just kind of.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. I'm still new to this. I'm not like my friend Jonathan who can just like whiz around real quick through like 4 different apps and he knows all this stuff like an encyclopedia. Unfortunately, maybe I'll get there someday.
You're not
okay. So yeah, let me read this real quick here. So Luke and the widow of Nain. So you're saying that he knows the Greco-Roman world, which I think still counts for a lot because it shows over and over and over again he's getting things right. And these are like hard details to get because it's not just like one area. It's like Philippi, Thessalonica, Ephesus, all of these different areas. Like somebody you're saying like would have to travel to all these places and invent a story about traveling with Paul that they didn't really travel with Paul.
He knows like the name of the temples in the different cities and he knows who was like the governor and he knows like the best like
and their titles and the titles change from
but so anyway, like I agree, like because I have the Yale anchor commentary on Acts, and the guy was like going through a lot of the stuff that Luke gets right. So I agree, like he does get a lot of stuff right.
Right. So here's the detail within. This is just one. Okay, I'm just going to give you one, and then I'm running kind of short on time, so I want to get to one more caller, and then you're always welcome back. I like this kind of stuff. You seem Skeptics Bible Project. Is that your channel?
Yeah, we've done a couple reviews of your stuff.
Okay. I
don't think we were mean.
Tag me next time.
It was you doing reviews of Ehrman and then us sticking up for Bart Ehrman.
Oh no,
you can imagine,
apologist.
You can imagine the tense exchanges going back and forth.
But you see me going like this. I'm trying to get a fly. I'm not insane. Here, let me read this real quick to you, and then I'll let you go. But no, I appreciate that. Tag me next time. I like the criticism. So she says this is in Lydia McGrew's book, the Testimonies to the Truth: Why You Can Trust the Gospels. Only Luke tells us about how Jesus raised the son of the widow of Nain from the dead. Luke 7:11 through 17. Nain is in a town in Lower Galilee, about 10 miles south of Nazareth. When Jesus and his disciples are approaching the city gate, they see a funeral procession coming out. Jesus has compassion on the mother of the dead young woman, approaches her and says, "Do not weep. There is something moving in the simplicity of this, blah, blah, blah." I'm going to skip to the fun facts. She points out that in the Talmud, in discussing the words of Ecclesiastes 12:5, there's this disagreement about the mourners who go about in the streets. They say both that you should live thinking about what you want the mourners to say while you are walking behind your bier, and what you should say when you want them to say about you when you're walking before the bier. Okay, so behind and before. And what the Talmud does, and I can look up the exact passage if you want it, the Talmud reconciles these by pointing out that in Judea, the custom is for the mourners or the eulogizers to walk behind the bier, I might be pronouncing wrong, in the funeral procession, while in Galilee, the custom is them to walk in front. Since Jesus and his disciples were approaching the gate in the town, it's reasonable to picture the funeral procession as coming out in the gate in order, while the mother and other mourners are walking ahead of the men carrying the body. Jesus thus approaches the mother first and speaks gently to her, then approaches the bier and stops at it. And so again, you have this picture in Luke. She's up front because of where she's located, and this is the way that Luke pictures it, but he never mentions any of this kind of stuff. It's just like this weird historical detail about this custom about how people walk in front of a funeral procession, and whether the family is walking before or behind. He actually gets it right in this specific town. And so that tells me, like, maybe he's talking to witnesses who just remembered how it happened. He doesn't know probably anything about these customs. He's just reporting it, but it just actually happens to match up exactly the way that the Talmud describes. And so that's just one. Luke mentions a lot of things about local stuff in Israel that he gets right.
So people have said this. I haven't read enough about it to really know. Doesn't Luke have a lot of Aramaic in his gospel, like Greek Aramaic, or Aramaic phrasing? Do you know? Or Aramaic?
I'm sure what you're referring to right off the top of my head at the moment, and it could just be because it's a long day and it's getting late here. So,
but that old Luke, that story, right?
What's that? That's only Luke. That's only Luke with the widow of Nain, right? And this is just one. And so, there's others as well. I can get into that with you some other time. But Ben, I appreciate meeting you, and I would talk to you more, but I got a few more to get to, and I gotta call it quits there. So
appreciate you spending some time.
Yeah, no, that's good pushback, man. And I will look into your channel and see all the mean and nasty things that you've said about me.
We're usually pretty nice.
No, you're good. You're good. All right, take care, man. All right. Do one more. Then I gotta go tell my kids goodnight. I have 3 of you waiting. One's been waiting longer than the other, and it is Fazil. So I apologize for Authentic Candor, Alexander, Simon. I will be doing these more regularly, so just keep watching, and I'll bring you up. Unless Fazil ditches me, so hang on, man. Maybe Fazil doesn't show. But anyways, testify. You should debate deconstruction zone. I've seen that guy. Michael, I think, from Inspiring Philosophy, just destroyed him on Tim Pool. It was pretty bad. When Tim Pool fact checks you and you're wrong, that's pretty bad. I have watched some of his lives. He does make some kind of interesting arguments, I guess, but I don't know. Some of it I find kind of cringy, but he's a Bible guy, and I respect that about him. I like atheists who are into the Bible, just like Ben that we were just talking to a minute ago. So, all right. Basil, you are up. I got about 20 minutes. And so what you got? Is Jesus alive?
Hello, how are you? Am I audible?
Good. Are you Muslim, atheist, agnostic?
Yeah, I'm a Muslim.
Muslim, okay. So Jesus is not resurrected from the dead. He's alive, but he basically Allah took him up. Is that your position?
Yeah, my position is I'm curious because if it is resurrection really happened, then why don't we have any historical evidence for that now? We have the historical evidence for the crucifixion, but we have nothing for the resurrection. So that doesn't make sense, right?
Were you watching the beginning of the stream?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, at the beginning of the stream, I go through evidence for the historical reliability of the Gospels that gives us reasons to think that the people who reported that what they wrote down actually goes back to eyewitnesses and goes back to their reports. And so you would probably say as a Muslim that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are historically unreliable, that they weren't eyewitnesses, that they don't know anything about it. But the whole point of the earlier part of the stream is that I'm arguing strongly against that. I'm saying that they're close up to the facts, that they're honest, that they're truthful, that they're trying to get things right, and that they actually are really, really knowledgeable. And they show themselves to be that way, like over and over and over again. So from my standpoint, I would be like, well, why would I go with the Quran, which comes hundreds of years later, when I have the Gospels who know about the customs of the time, they know about the rulers of the time, they know about the archaeology, you know, all of that different kind of stuff, and they show themselves just to be close up to Jesus and know what he actually said.
Yeah, my point is like you cannot use the Bible to prove the Bible. That is a circular argument, right?
That's not a
if you need
no,
to be,
it's not a circular argument, because I'm not saying that the Bible is inspired and therefore the Bible is true, therefore that's it. You know, like I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that we can test the Bible historically through archaeology, through external confirmations in history, and also just the way that it's written and how it corroborates itself through like things like undesigned coincidences. And so I'm saying look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John like a historian, and you'll see that what is being claimed in the four Gospels goes back to what the eyewitnesses actually claimed.
mm, I don't get it how you come to that conclusion, because what you are telling is maybe some information in the Bible is true. Because of that one, everything I can believe in the Bible. That doesn't make sense, right? Because what you're telling is some of the things, yes, we have archaeological evidence for that one. That doesn't mean everything is true. Right? Any
I'm
books
not
you have
saying that
some.
it No, I'm not saying that just because they get a bunch of historical facts right, that everything that they say is like we should take that as 100% true. But what I am saying is that it shows us what kind of authors they are, and it shows us that they're trying to get it right, that they're close up to the facts, and that they are pretty knowledgeable. And if they're constantly getting things right over and over and over again, then why should we just assume that like when they are reporting something that disagrees with your theology, that they're just making that up and they're just inventing that that's just some kind of corruption or something that they're just kind of pulling out of their rear end, so to speak. Like if somebody tells you, Fazil, like over and over, like if you have a friend and they constantly show themselves to be like an honest person, you don't go, okay, like I have to like judge everything that they say one by one, every single statement that they say. No, you look at that person and you go, they have an honest track record. And so what they're saying is they're usually trying to be really accurate with me. So why would I just like suddenly assume that they're lying when they're always honest with me? And again, I'm not saying that like just because the Gospels are reliable, Jesus rose from the dead. I'm just saying that it goes back to what they originally claimed. Now, the content of their, but the content, real quick, I'll just finish this and then you can jump in. The content of their claim is that they touched Jesus physically after he rose from the dead, that they ate with him, that they saw him, that he spoke with them. So that's something really difficult to be mistaken about. And in the context of their claim, they made this claim before a hostile audience. And so it's really unlikely that they're lying. And so, but what you would need to know is like, you'd have to go back and watch earlier, because I'm not just like saying this as like something that you should just accept. I give multiple lines of evidence that this is the kind of authors that the gospel writers are.
Yeah, I got your point because I have listened to those kind of argument. But my point is like if you're consistent, then you have to believe Prophet Muhammad also a prophet, because before Islam he was called Al Amin, the trustworthy one, right? The people call him in that name. So then if he saw his track record, that means he's a good person, he's a trustworthy. Then whatever he's telling should be true. Then you have to come to the same conclusion. He's a prophet.
That's terrible, because just because he's called supposedly like the trustworthy one from what? All of these sources would be Islamic. And so I could go, okay, yeah, sure. He claims to be trustworthy. That's fine. Prima facie, he's the trustworthy one. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But then I can test him and I can find out how trustworthy he is. And so when I look at the Quran and I see that it like makes like mistakes, historical mistakes, like,
Can you tell me example? One example?
well, like, yeah, 1274, it says that people in Egypt around Moses' time were crucified, but they weren't. That was a practice that came later with the Persians, hundreds of years later.
No, because lack of evidence, that doesn't mean that never happened, right? Because if you see
But
historical wise, we don't have any
okay,
evidence for Moses. That doesn't mean Moses never existed, right?
But there weren't crucifixions in the time. We know how they executed people in Egypt, and that wasn't one of them. And so, is it saying like, is that like a knockdown proof that the Quran is false just from that one thing? No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is like, that's a strike against it, right? Like if that was the Bible, Basil, and it was like we were saying, like, let's just say crucifixions didn't happen until, I don't know, 400 AD. You'd be like, whoa, like if the Christian said, well, yeah, well, we don't know that they didn't happen. Rome invented them in 400, but we don't know that it couldn't have happened. I mean, I don't think you would accept that. So you're lowering your standard for the Quran, but like you're raising the standard way up for the Gospels, right? And that's just one. Like there's chainmail armor, right? I forget the exact verse. I could look it up. But David is portrayed in the Quran as making chainmail armor. Well, again, chainmail armor wasn't something that was invented until hundreds of years later. And so that's like another anachronism, right? And it's like, there's also the fact that like the Quran uses other sources, like the infancy gospel of Thomas, where it has him talking, right? Or the 7th century pseudo Matthew, where it has like the whole issue with Mary and the palm tree and all this other kind of stuff. Like we know where those sources came from. And so like, we know these are apocryphal sources that were floating around at the time. We see historical anachronisms in multiple places. I just gave you 2 examples, like right off the top of my head. I have a video where I point out like, I don't know, like 8 or so. And that's just, again, a handful, like there are multiple. And so if Muhammad is getting it wrong, but saying it's divine revelation, I can't just assume where I can check him and I find out that it looks like he's false, then he's not the trustworthy one anymore. Just like you would say, if the Bible makes errors,
of course, no, first of all, like, but whatever you are telling, these are lack of evidence. So lack of evidence doesn't mean that those are wrong. Right? We don't have evidence for Adam. We don't have Abraham. We don't have evidence for Moses. Even we don't have evidence for Malachi, the last Old Testament prophet. We have historical evidence only for Jesus. So that doesn't mean these people did not exist.
But I'm arguing but the stream is arguing for the resurrection. So I'm not talking about Malachi. I'm not talking about historical proof for Moses. Jesus affirms Moses. Jesus affirms the prophets. But if Jesus is God and he's resurrected from the dead, then I have a good reason to trust Jesus. But my reasons for trusting those prophets are routed through the fact that who Jesus is. And so I'm not arguing for Moses. I'm not arguing for Abraham. I'm not arguing for any of these people. I think the broad outlines of like the Exodus, there is evidence for it. My friend Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy has multiple videos on evidence for the Exodus. So it's not like there's no proof for any of this kind of stuff. There's also proof for like King Hezekiah, and there's proof for David. There's proof for a lot of Old Testament figures, but that's not the argument here. The argument here is, did Jesus raise from the dead? And I'm giving you reasons to, or at least I'm telling you that I have reasons to think that the Gospels are reliable. And they point to Jesus being raised from the dead. You're saying, well, Muhammad said that he wasn't. He was never crucified. And those who, who say so, they're in doubt. They don't know. They don't have real knowledge. And I'm like, I'm saying one of them was right there. And multiple of them, multiple accounts in these Gospels talk about people who were his disciples who saw him raised after he was dead. They saw him resurrected. So why should I believe? Why should I believe Muhammad? Why should I believe Muhammad over Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John?
The same Bible say all of them left, right? I think Gospel of John telling John was there, but other 3 Gospels say all of them left. It's mentioned specifically all of them left, right? So
I
do I
didn't
have
catch
to
that.
believe in three?
I didn't catch that, man. I'm sorry. I couldn't quite
Yeah,
make that.
I'm telling the three other gospel, Mark, Matthew, and Luke, say all of the disciples left the site of crucifixion.
Did
They were
John
not there.
leave? Did John leave at the crucifixion?
Yeah, only Gospel of John say he
Was
goes at the site.
Jesus's own mother at the crucifixion? Was
But the
Jesus's
other
female?
Gospels,
Was Jesus's
but
female followers at the crucifixion?
they were
So,
looking at
Father,
from a distance.
how do we know things? How do we know when historical events happen? Through eyewitnesses, right? So if the disciples themselves left, but female followers were there, including Jesus' own mother, one of his disciples, and then we have their testimony. Even if I don't have, if Peter fled and some of the others fled, I still have
All of them
John.
fled.
I still have the women. No, you
No, the
haven't
Bible
read.
says all of them. No, it
You have
says.
not
Can
read.
you go to the verse?
You have not
Can
read
you go to
John
the verse?
chapter. Can you go to John chapter
No,
19? Read John
no,
chapter
I
19. Read John
yeah,
chapter
I know.
19.
Yeah, I know. John says he was there, but I'm telling other gospels, like other Mark, Matthew, and Luke, they say all of them fled. They say Mary was looking into the crucifixion from a distance. That's what I'm asking. Your three gospels, they are contradictions. Three gospels say all of them fled.
It's
The
not a
Gospel of John says
contradiction
John
because
was aside.
somebody could be
Okay.
flee from the scene and then they could still like go, you know what, I messed up and return. There's way too much evidence for the eyewitness testimony of the Gospel of John. I have multiple videos on this particular topic. If you want to talk about reliability of John, we could talk about the reliability of John, but there's no reason for me to doubt when John says that he's present and he sees a spear thrown at Jesus and it hits his heart and water and blood flow out. I don't have any reason to think that he wasn't there. For example, it says that there
Yeah,
were four soldiers there. There were four soldiers there. It's called a quaternion. They gambled for his garments, right? But he doesn't parade that fact around. He doesn't parade that fact about at all. But we know from history that quaternions were a thing in Rome. It was a particular kind of guard for prisoners. I can find the exact historical reference for that. So one
yeah,
second.
that's fine. Now my point is, why are you choosing the Gospel of John over other three gospel? All three of them say all of them fled. It says specifically telling
That's not
all
a
of them
but
fled the site.
that's not a contradiction. It could just be hyperbole. It could be John had a change of heart. There's a number of different ways. Like if you do we not harmonize historical documents when they like don't exactly agree on every single details? Do we just throw them out if there's even like a small appearance of contradiction?
I'm telling you, when you say all of them, then it is talking about the whole the disciples, right? It could have the most of them.
Do we throw historical documents out when there is just like an appearance of contradiction at all? Is that what we do?
We try to like get a neutral picture, but when it say all of them, like it could have say most of them, right? Why it is telling all of them? Three gospel telling all of them instead of most of them. If it say most of them, okay, then fine. Okay, most of them fled, some of them were on site. That makes sense.
So what you're telling me to do is because you see like an appearance of contradiction, which could be hyperbole, or it could be that John was just like, you know what, I screwed up. I'm going back. I'm going to support Jesus or something like that. I mean, you like these are all like possibilities. I should throw out all the positive evidence for the historical reliability of John and like the layers of information that he has, because you see like one appearance of like a contradiction that like you don't even know for sure is even a contradiction. It's just like you're just saying, well, it says all, so it's got to be all. Like that's it. Period. Like I don't.
Okay,
That doesn't work. Tell
okay,
me how
no.
that works.
Okay. Well, anyhow, let me agree with you. Okay, you say all the gospels are okay. Oh, then all the gospels are reliable. Okay, they are telling the real story. Okay, that's fine. Oh, my question is like when it comes to historians, they are going to record the biggest event in history. So resurrection is supposed to be the biggest thing ever happened, even until today. So my point is like if such a thing happened, the Tacitus, Suetonius, the Pliny the Younger, Pliny the Elder, Josephus, there are so many historians at the time of first century. None of them talk about this resurrection. Like the
If they
At
talked
they
about
talk
the
about
if they talked about the resurrection, Fazil, they'd be Christians. They're aware of the resurrection because
it is not a fact, right? No, it is
Tacitus
not a
talks
fact. That is the incident, right? That is the incident, right?
Tacitus talks about how that he
Mm.
was crucified, or at least he's aware that
Yeah,
this is something and that he still has followers to this day. Josephus talks
yeah.
about how he was crucified and that people believe that he was resurrected after this day.
No,
Like
Josephus do not say resurrection. That is a complete forgery, right? You know it. That
he says
Josephus
that
telling is
he
complete
said they
forgery.
still he still has followers. There was a report. The original probably it's been interpolated some, but the original probably says that he had followers that they believed that he was resurrected and they were still following around. Okay, and so like you have multiple, like you're saying, okay, here, I'll turn the tables on you. Okay, so you're saying, oh well, there should be evidence, like everybody should be talking about this if Jesus was resurrected. He appeared to 12 disciples, right? And Paul, like, and then
Mm.
like 500, he didn't appear to every single person on the face of the planet. Like, it was reported. We have reports of this in the book of Acts. We have Paul's letters. We have the early apostolic church fathers, who we have evidences of Christianity spreading all throughout the Roman world, preaching that he's resurrected. But yet you're telling me, well, we don't have evidence because it should be reported, it should be reported, it should be reported. Surah 355 says that Jesus's followers were made dominant until the day of resurrection. And 6114 says something really, really similar. And yet for 500 years, there is not one group of people who proclaimed this Muslim Jesus, who wasn't really crucified, wasn't really resurrected. You don't have anybody. You don't have a single source. You have nobody. And so don't come at me with, well, if the resurrection really happened, then like Josephus would have like written a giant book about it. Like, no, dude, you have people who said that Jesus' followers would be victorious till the day of resurrection. And for 500 years, you cannot name a single follower, a single group of followers of who that matches up with the Islamic picture of Jesus that he supposedly preached. No, the dominant message was the Christian message that he was crucified and he was resurrected.
Yeah, well, I can talk about that one, but it will take time. So second thing I need to ask you with regard to resurrection, I don't understand why the disciples keep following the law if the
So
really resurrection happened.
you're accusing me of not having enough information, but like but you're sidestepping the argument that I just made. We have records of Pharisees, we have records of Sadducees, we have records of the Essenes, we have records of Arian Christians, we have records of Sabellian Christians, we have records of all kinds of pagan groups, all kinds of Gnostic groups like Montanus, and they're not Gnostic, but Valentinians, Marcionites, and all that other stuff. We have dozens and dozens and dozens of religious groups, and we don't have one person that you could point to that's actually like a true follower of Prophet Jesus that preached the Islamic gospel. We don't have one. But you want to come back to me with like there's historical problems about the gospel? Like, your book has one of the biggest contradictions in the world. Like, there is absolutely zero evidence whatsoever for a victorious following of Jesus for 500 years. There's nobody. There's no dominant group at all. There's only Trinitarian Christians who became dominant. So like, you got to answer that before I like move on, because like I don't think you're going to be able to name anybody. And so like, that is a way bigger problem than like, oh no, Tacitus didn't like say, whoa, we saw the resurrection, and like he wasn't there. Like, but he knows about it. He knows people are proclaiming it. He just doesn't believe it. So what?
No. First of all, we have the Ebionites, Nazarians, so that they had similar belief like Muslims. Okay, so
No, the
we have evidence for them.
Nazarians believe that Jesus was crucified and resurrected. So no, big strike one. Who else you
No,
got?
crucified and no. Okay, no. So first of all, like these people, that's my second point. These people never believe in crucifixion. That's why they follow the law.
The Nazarians believed in the crucifixion. Show me a source where it doesn't, where they deny the crucifixion.
Okay, No, if you go to the Talmud
Show
and
me a
other stuff, okay,
source where the Nazarenes denied the crucifixion and the resurrection.
yeah,
Show me a source.
that's what. Okay, that's what I'm telling. Okay, now when it comes to Christian,
Show
the
me a
Jewish,
source where the Nazarenes denied the crucifixion and the resurrection.
yeah, that's what I'm coming to say. That's what I'm coming to say. So now when it comes to Jewish Christians,
You don't have
okay,
a source.
yeah, we don't. I have a source.
No, you
That's
don't
what
have
I'm
a
telling.
source. What is the
Of
source?
course,
Show me the source. That
yeah, that's what I'm.
Nazarenes rejected the crucifixion and resurrection.
That's what I'm telling. Okay, now if you need to listen to me, what I'm telling. Okay, yes, there was a one of the best debate between James White and the Zakir Hussain. Okay, did the crucifixion happen? Go and watch that one. Okay,
That's a debate.
that's what
I'm asking you to show me an actual source that you're aware of.
yeah, that's what I'm telling. Okay, that's what I'm
I've
telling.
looked at this. The Nazarenes affirmed the crucifixion. They affirmed the resurrection. They never denied it.
Okay, so first of all, okay, when these people like Jewish Christian, when they are talking about death and resurrection, they are not talking about actual resurrection. Like when these people talk about death and resurrection of Isaac, was
See,
Isaac being killed? Right, go and check that one. I'm not lying. Okay, this Jewish Christian talking about death and resurrection of Isaac. Did
what I'm
Isaac was
hearing,
killed?
what I'm hearing is you don't have a source.
I have a source. I have the Talmud. I have these Jewish Christian sources. In that one, these
The
people are talking
Talmud,
about
the
death.
Talmud does not mention the Nazarenes. Where
No,
in
no,
the
I'm
Talmud?
talking about.
Where in the Talmud does it mention the Nazarenes rejecting the crucifixion and resurrection?
No, I'm not telling that. I'm telling when the Jewish Christian talking about resurrection and death and resurrection, they are not actually talking about that. They are talking about something else. Like the same way when they are talking about death and resurrection of Isaac. So they are talking about Isaac was saved by the God at the last moment. Go and check that one. Right? It is easy.
Where is this in the Talmud? Where does this deny Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection?
That's what I'm telling. I'm telling when the Jewish Christians are talking death and resurrection, they are not talking about actual crucifixion event of crucifixion. They are talking about Jesus was saved at the last
So
moment. The
show
same
me
way.
where. So share me where in the Talmud does it say that?
Yeah, I can point to the source. Maybe let me go and search. In the meantime, that's why these people follow the law. So you cannot answer that one. Why these people follow the law if they believe Jesus died for their sins? That
Why
doesn't
did
make sense.
that doesn't make sense to you? But you're not giving me a source, okay? That they didn't.
That's why. Yeah.
The Judaizers in Galatia followed the law. They were trying to influence the Galatian church to follow the law and saying you need to be circumcised to be saved. They believed in Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. So that's terrible.
That doesn't make sense. The Paul telling if you follow the law, then Jesus died for nothing.
Paul's right, but it's a debate over. It's not a debate over what happened to Jesus. It's a debate over the interpretation of the theology.
Yeah, my point is like if Jesus died for the sins, what is the point of keeping the law? Why the Christians continue to keep the law?
You're doing the Muslim shuffle right now. Don't do that to me, Faisal. You're shuffling. You're changing the subject. I'm asking you to find a true follower of Jesus. You're telling me that I have errors in my sources, and I should have more evidence. So your own source, 355, 6114, creates an expectation in me to see dominant followers who preached the Islamic Jesus, that he was never crucified, that he was born of a virgin, but he was never crucified, and he was only a prophet. And you got a James White debate and a trust me, bro. I need something more than that because you're coming at me with a standard and I'm saying, okay, apply that standard on your religion because it's 100 times worse. And all I got again is there was James White debated somebody. Trust me, bro. There was something about the Talmud and there was Isaac and a resurrection. You don't have anything. You don't have anything.
Testify. I have something, but within this time, I cannot show it to you.
You don't have it. You have a promissory note. But trust me, bro. Okay, so what's the source?
I have it. Okay.
Name source.
Okay. Oh, the thing is, okay, if you say I don't have it, give me a time. I can come to the show. I can prove it to you.
All right.
No, the point is.
Thanks, sir. No, we're done here, buddy. Thanks for coming. All right. All right. I feel like I need that God Logic song that he does with the afterwards, the Allahu Akbar or whatever. All right, modern atheism. I'm sorry, bro. I see you there. I love you, but I'm done. It is I have to go tell my kids goodnight and all that other kind of stuff. It's getting late here. Been going for 2 hours, but I appreciate you guys calling in, and I'll be doing more of these, I promise. And we'll still be talking about resurrection. I'll talk about resurrection in a future video. And so anyways, I hope this was helpful for you guys, and yeah, we'll do more of these. This is fun, and so thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for the super chats. I really appreciate that. And subscribe, like, do all that other good stuff, and we'll catch you on the next one.